Hi, my name is Scott, the Miniature Maniac, and today we continue the Homecoming series with converting the witch and creating the cross that she is crucified on. What up, Mini family? I'm excited to get started on this conversion, but one thing we need to take care of first is that my work area is a total disaster zone. Bullet agrees, don't you, Bullet? There's crap everywhere. It's surrounding me all the time. It's endless. We need to take care of this. Hi. All right, all nice and clean. Let's assemble this babe now. Okay, full disclosure, I actually assembled the entirety of Blackstone Fortress between actually cleaning my table and starting on this project. I'm stalling. Let's get started for real. This mini reminds me of why I hate assembling malifaux miniatures. It has a separate piece for its right bang. What? Also, there seems to be a giant gap between where the back of the hair should be and where the head should end. I'm an idiot, I just assembled it wrong. You're supposed to take the hair, which has half of the head, and attach the face to it, because the face comes separately, and then put the right bang on. Generally, I don't like it when people criticize how a sprue is laid out or all the miniatures goes together, because typically there's a lot that goes into making those decisions, but Weird has a tendency to make these really weird decisions about how to assemble miniatures and lay out sprues. Eventually, I got the miniature together, but as I'm sure you can imagine, I struggled quite a bit. Now on to doing some conversions. I assume that 18th century Christians, when they crucify a witch, probably wouldn't give her knives. So we need to remove those. We're just gonna clip them off and then shave and sand away the evidence that they were ever there. Then we'll take a metal awl and poke a hole in her fist and then start to drill a little recess into where her palm would be. Dealing with a hand this tiny at this scale, 32mm true scale, we're not gonna drill all the way through the hand because that would be risky AF. We might mess up the alignment or the hole might look too big. But also a hole that isn't punched all the way through still looks realistic. And then we're gonna do the same thing to the other hand. Now she still has clenched fists, and considering how difficult it is to properly sculpt hand anatomy, especially at this scale, we're gonna keep the fists clenched, and we're probably gonna have some rope running through her hands like she's grabbing onto the thing that is fastening her to the cross. She's also wearing these very long, very thin gloves that you can almost barely see. And so what we'll do is we'll just take a sponge sanding stick and file away those little ridges so it looks like just a normal forearm and hand. Sometimes it can be difficult to get rid of plastic dust, and one thing that I really like to do is take a very, very, very small amount of plastic glue thin and run it along the surface. This very, very mildly melts the plastic, getting rid of all the dust shavings and also giving you a really nice smooth finish. This won't work with stuff like Games Workshop's thicker plastic glue. You need the really thin stuff, but it really does kind of take care of that surface, and it gives you a better idea of what the final product's gonna look like. So I really like doing this. All right, the next thing we're gonna do to our witch is cut her to bits so we can reposture her arms and her head and other things. So we're gonna let the plastic glue dry fully and set up before we move on to the cutting. So we'll start working on the cross. And for the cross, I'm going to use this hollow rectangular styrene that I have. Now I did some research, and typically the cross member in the cross is about 1/4 of the length down from the top. And if the cross is about 12 feet long, the cross member itself is about half that size. So I have a 6-inch long cross, so I cut out a 3-inch long member. And then I kind of compared it to our witch's absolutely nutty wingspan, and it seemed a little bit too small. So I kind of broke some rules here and went with a 4-inch long cross member instead. Now for the joinery, I wanted to attach these two pieces with what's called a crossed half lap joint. It is a traditional woodworking joint. Essentially what I'm doing is I'm just cutting out a hollow section in the cross member to puzzle piece into the vertical piece. And the first time I tried to do this, I actually made it way too big and there was too much play in the joint. Even though it would work with plastic glue and then I could fill the joint, I didn't want to have to deal with that. So I recut it shorter and then kind of filed it down so it would fit really nicely and then glued it in place. And now while that sets up, we can move back to our witch, who should be fully cured by this point. Okay, so we have some repositioning that we need to do for this witch, namely her head, which is rotated in the wrong direction, and also arms, which are positioned in the wrong areas. We need to cut all those things off, re-glue them or re-pin them, and then start to fill in the gaps and shape it down so it looks natural. Additionally, her stomach area is kind of like, it's kind of curved out, so we need to cut it and reposition it so that her back is more flat, like she's kind of against a crucifix. Now the way that I've done this in the past, and I'm not sure if this is a normal thing to do, is I'll cut it and then pin the two pieces together at the particular angle that I want to use, and then use a lot of super glue to make sure that it stays there. And then I'll take like a 2-part epoxy sculpting material. In this case I used epoxy sculpt, and I'll fill in the gap and try to continue the detail from one section to the other. In this case it is a long running dress. Now epoxy sculpt is pretty similar to green stuff in that maybe it doesn't sand the best and it isn't necessarily water soluble like milliput is. It can still be smoothed with water, and it also can be smoothed with Vaseline. I'm just using some dental tools to apply the epoxy sculpt, and I'm also using some color shapers, which I really like for smoothing out all the detail and kind of pushing it in the area that I want. Obviously, as time goes on, the epoxy sculpt cures more, and the more it cures, the harder it is, and kind of the easier it is to work with, because in its state right out of the canister, it's really soft and pliable, and it's really easy to push around, especially when it has water on the surface. So the longer it goes, the little bit harder it gets, and then kind of the easier it is to work with in some degree. While I do this incredibly tedious sculpting, we have some patrons to shout out. Big love goes to Dalton Nielsen, Andrew Lusix. I'm gonna butcher a lot of these names, just a little bit of a heads up. Kostis Mavridis, Brandon Brockwell, Corentin Ryacourt. Oh God, that's a terrible one. Plus 2D6, Essie Doherty, Jordan Goetz, Cameron Cortez, Thomas Ross, John Aaron, Goblin Demolition Crew, Keith Banks, John Allen, Levi, Pete Ward, Mott Ride, Dhruv Patel, Ross Armstrong, Robert Campbell, Raku Senpai, Winston Pope, Joseph Wuffelsberger, Matthias Anderson, Mark McKinley, Eufel, Razel Kuiper, Gagbomb, Lena Witzner, Yadrive Ivelinski, Ben Leffler, John, that's an easy one, I could do that one, Devin Haverty, Timothy O'Connell, Paul Broodrooster, Michael Higginbotham, Adam Fuchs, and Clive Harvey. I'm gonna need to start to do these Patreon shoutouts probably more often than once a month, because the amount of patrons that I get in a month is truly, truly astounding. And I couldn't be more grateful for the support that you guys give me over on Patreon. Thank you so much. Patreon is the largest revenue stream that I have as a YouTube video creator, and the best way to support me. And some of the rewards that you can get are a Discord server where you and I can hang out and chat any day of the week. But it's not just any old Discord server, no. There is a point system on this Discord server that you get awarded when you paint miniatures. These points then give you a certain rank on the server, and also at the end of the year, each point is a raffle ticket in a raffle to earn some cool stuff. So we have like a leaderboard, and there's a fun competition that goes on the entire year. There are quarterly themes that you can do to get extra bonus points. It's a lot of fun. And also, I programmed the bot, and I feel cool about that. But beyond the Discord server, you can also see my YouTube videos a week early. If you were to become a patron today, there's a whole other Miniac video that you can watch. And you can also have the chance of winning a miniature that I painted. So those are all the fun rewards that I have. You can find a link to it in the description of this video. Thank you again to all the new patrons this previous month, and also all of my long-term patrons. Thank you guys so much. All right, back to the video. One thing I noticed when I made her dress a little shorter was that her arms are ridiculously long, and I feel like I need to shorten them. So I need to shorten the arm, both the bicep and the forearm, in such a way that she still looks like a normal human, but also in such a way that it matches what her height is, which in this case we're doing something like 32 or 40 millimeter scale based on the size of the door. So let's try to do that. Okay, so it turns out that the average human arm span is equal to the person's height. So if my miniature should be 40 mil tall, that means the arm span should be around 40 millimeter. And in fact, it is right now. It looks a little off because the dress is a little bit shorter than it's going to be in the final product. So what I'll do is I'll shorten the forearms a little bit because they seem a little bit cartoonishly long, and then I will make the dress longer later in the process, and hopefully that should kind of work out the strange body proportions our witch has. Next, I glued the head on, and I realized that the thickness of the hair is going to get in the way of the character resting her back flat against the cross. So we're going to need to modify that in some way. But first I'm going to glue it on, and I'm going to reinforce that glue with some of my plastic sprue thin glue slurry, and then once that fully cures, then we'll consider shortening it and modifying it. While that cures, I figured I'd make an installation point for my cross. I just got a bunch of epoxy sculpt and put it on the base and plugged in the cross and then pulled it out so there'd be a little square registration for the cross to install into. I figure a lot of logs and wood is going to be covering this mound, so I'm not really concerned about what it looks like. I then realized that the hinges on my doors were kind of just floating in mid-space. They weren't attached in any meaningful way to the door itself, which is funny. So I took some very thin styrene and I'm gluing it in place on the door itself, and then I'm going to true up the door hinge plate so it matches the framing on the door. Then I'll take some epoxy sculpt and I will sculpt in a connection to the top and bottom of that little bar, and then the center part will be free floating. That's the part that's actually attached to the door in real life, and the top and bottom part are attached to the building, so that center column can freely swing, in this case, outwards. And now we have a semi-realistic door hinge now instead of just a floating cylinder. Next, I just chopped the hair off of the witch. I kind of just guessed where I should cut after holding it up to the cross a few times and then hacked it off with a hobby saw. I don't think I'm going to be able to reuse this hair in the final product. I'll need to probably sculpt my own, because some hair is going to be going in between the witch and the cross. Some hair is going to be going on the back of the cross. It's going to be kind of erratic. And some of you mentioned in the original video that some of the hair might be lifting up because of the fire below and the airflow that's being caused and circulated by the fire. I don't know the actual science because I'm stupid, but it happens, okay? Next, after that, I put some dirt on the base. And what I realized was when I was trying to use super glue, the wooden end grain was sucking up the super glue. So what I did first was I put a sealing layer of super glue down, then hit it with some accelerator to dry it to give it a nice hard shell. And then I glued my dirt on. I then sealed it all in place with some super glue thin, which, much like typical scenic glue, has that similar capillary action where it spreads amongst all the dirt and then seals it in nice and rock hard. But unlike PVA glue, it dries really fast. So for smaller things like this, I tend to like to use super glue thin. If I was doing a bigger piece of terrain, then I would use something like, like a scenic glue like this. After that, I distressed my cross in a similar way to how I did the rest of the wood. I scraped it with an awl, I sanded it with 100 grit sandpaper,
And I also took a wire brush to it to kind of clean up the fuzzies and kind of get rid of that typical I just scratched styrene look. I think we're starting to get there, guys. The next steps that we're going to take in the future videos in this series are we're going to start shaping the arms and the wrist region to make it look like it's one piece of human and not like I puzzle pieced a human together like Dr. Frankenstein. And we're going to attach her to the cross, sculpt the rest of her hair, sculpt the rest of her dress, and then get to undercoating and painting. I'm super excited for it. If you haven't seen the other videos in this Homecoming Crystal Brush series, you can find them in a link in the top right-hand corner of the screen right now. If you guys like this video series, let me know in the comments section below. And if you want to support the channel, there are tons of links in the description of this video that enable you to do so, namely a Patreon that we discussed earlier in the video, which gets you access to a Discord and other fun things, a merchandise store where you can buy a t-shirt with my logo on it, an Amazon shopping affiliate link that you can use while shopping on Amazon. Subscribe or die, and most importantly, don't forget to...